Good evening, or whenever you're watching this. Good morning, good afternoon, whatever, or whenever you're watching this. I just want to say I appreciate all the support I've been getting from the YouTube community. I really appreciate it. I didn't expect, I woke up today and I saw 71 subscribers. I mean, in retrospect to YouTube, that's not a lot, but if you have 71 people complimenting you and 71 people liking your shit in a room, you probably feel pretty accomplished. And so I really appreciate that. I do appreciate all the debate and the conversation that's been sparking in the comments of my previous videos. And that was my goal of this whole thing, was to get people talking. That was my own, and I don't care if I had to see them to do it, or I don't care if they were behind a screen. Is to get people talking and creating public discourse about what's going on in this country, no matter who's running it. If it was a Democrat, Republican, Independent, Socialist, feminist, fascist, I don't care. Just to get people talking, because the thing that stops people, that allows fascism and allows totalitarianism and allows all these bad things and these bad theories to persist, is the end of your thought. If you stop thinking about the current political state of the world, hate to sound like Jaden Smith there, but if you stop thinking like that about that, they can do whatever they want, and they can then think for you. So I really appreciate you guys commenting and liking and subscribing. It means a lot to me. I am not getting paid for this. This is genuinely what I'm interested in. I read about this stuff all the time. I study this stuff. I go to school for this stuff. And I love it. So I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. Keep making these videos unedited, unscripted. Well, they have my notes, but which is on the side of the screen. But those, I mean, it's really, you could say it's scripted or not. But my mic broke today. I don't know if the volume might be a little different. I don't know how it broke, but it broke, so I just got to get a new one. But yeah, I appreciate you guys. I'm gonna keeping it low, keeping it low key, keeping it no editing skills, just talking at you, and then hopefully you can spark some debate. Thanks. But I was reading, and I just finished reading Michael Parenti's Blackshirts and Reds. My school had it in its library, which was surprising. I did not know that until I looked it up, and I was like, whoa. Good for you, library. But in this book, he talks about the fascism, really. Black shirts and reds meaning communism, black shirts meaning fascism, fascist or whatever. And he gets you to think about what's the opposite of fascism in your mind. Fascism, when we think the opposite of fascism, we think democracy, freedom, the good guys, the liberal West. And that's exactly what we've been trained to think. And this is what this whole book is about. It was published in 1997, dismantling the framing of what communist actually is, or what socialist actually is. Right. The argument in one sentence is that fascism was never the enemy of capitalism. It was capitalism's last line of defense. Let's get into it. The full title of the book is called Black Shirts and Reds, Rational Fascism and Overthrow of Communism. And we have to define what rational means in this context. Most mainstream accounts of fascism treat it like kind of a political insanity. Hitler was a madman, Mussolini was a delusional megalomaniac, and they were aberrations. They were extreme, irrational, one of horrors that the civilized world eventually defeated. Parenti says that no, fascism was rational. Fascism that is from the perspective of capital. Here's the actual logic on that. When working class movements started gaining power, unions organizing, socialist parties winning elections, communist revolutions threatening to actually redistribute wealth, the capitalist class faced a problem. Normal democratic politics might not be enough to stop this. So what do? You fund the guys in the black shirts. You fund the fascists. Parenti's core argument is that fascist movements in Italy, Germany, and Spain did not rise to power despite capitalism. They rose to power because of it. Industrial elites, landowners, and financial institutions bankrolled these movements. They funded these movements because they were the most effective tool available for crushing the left and preserving the existing class structure. Not struggle. In Italy, Mussolini's Blackshirts spent years beating, torturing, and murdering socialist organizers, union leaders, and peasant activities. With the explicit backing of landowners and industrialists who were terrified of a workers' movement that was actually winning. In Germany, many major corporations, like I've mentioned before in previous videos, that Krupp, Thyssen, IG Farben funneled money to the Nazi Party, not because they shared Hitler's racial obsessions necessarily, but because the Nazis promised to destroy the German Communist Party. And the trade unions, which they did, in fact, within months of coming to power. Parenti writes that fascism strips of its ideological and organizational trappings. It's essentially a final solution to the class struggle. The total submersion of democratic forces for the benefit of financial elites. It's a false revolution. It has the appearance of popular politics, right? The rallies, the nationalism, the populist rhetoric, without any genuine redistribution of power or wealth, right? But here's where we're going to connect it to something we've been talking about on this channel, about totalitarianism. Now, I'm only talking about totalitarianism so much because I'm doing research on it, and the research consists of a 24-page paper and like 5 books I have to read before the end of this year, and because the paper will be done by the end of this year, and I'll probably share it with you all. But yeah. But the framework that became enormously popular during the Cold War was totalitarianism, and the basic idea that Nazi Germany and Soviet Union were essentially the same type of state. They were both equally evil, yes, or monstrosity, have a monstrosity going on, but both driven by the same totalizing logic, two sides of the same authoritarian coin, right? Parenti thinks that this is one of the most ideological, motivated concepts in modern political thought. And Blackshirts and Reds is in many ways to attack this. His argument is that equating fascism and communism serves a very specific political purpose. It likes you to discredit any challenge to capitalism by associating it with the most universally condemned regime in history. Can't attack socialism on its own merits. Just call it the same thing as Nazism and watch the conversation shut down, right? But look at this material reality. Fascist states protected private property. They crushed unions. They handed state contracts to private corporations. The capitalist class thrived under fascism, often more than they had under liberal democracy, because fascism removed the one thing that threatened it, or threatened them, the capitalist class, the elite capitalist class, which was organized labor in the political left. The Soviet Union, whatever its enormous failures and genuine atrocities, right, abolished private ownership, though, of the means of production. It was fundamentally different relationship between the state and capital. You can't critique it. Parenti himself critiques aspects of it, but pretending it's structurally equivalent to a system that was literally funded by industrialists to protect their profits is intellectually dishonest. It's a dumb argument. The first part of Blackshirts and Reds takes direct aim to a liberal tendency to lump communism and fascism together. It correctly points out the most mainstream literature on fascism. It makes no mention of its class nature or its explicitly pro-big business policies. But the totalitarianism framework is that Parenti is arguing it is not a neutral analytical tool. It's an ideological one. It got most popular precisely when it was most useful, during the Cold War, when the U.S. needed a way to frame the global struggle against the Soviet Union as a moral crusade rather than a contest between competing economic systems. The second half of the book shifts focus from the Blackshirts to the Reds, to where Parenti makes the most controversial arguments. He argues that the Soviet Union and other communist states have to be understood in the context of the conditions they were operating under. He calls this siege socialism. The idea is that these were societies by the most powerful capitalist states on earth. The idea that these were the societies trying to build an alternative to capitalism while being actively sabotaged by the most powerful capitalist states on the earth, right? Through economic blockades, military intervention, proxy wars, CIA-backed coups, and relentless ideological warfare. Communist governments, despite the significant criticism they received, contributed to genuine modernization of previously destitute societies, right? They improved literacy, healthcare, and living standards in ways that often go entirely unacknowledged, overshadowed by the focus of political repression. And I want to be clear here when I say this. This is not the same as saying gulags didn't happen and the Stalinist repression wasn't real and horrific. Parenti or I aren't saying that. He acknowledges the crimes. The argument is about context and proportion. The Western narrative around capitalism emphasizes its crimes exhaustively while treating its achievements as either irrelevant or as propaganda. And it never applies the same standard to capitalism, which has its own body count, from colonialism to structural violence with poverty that dwarfs most anything in the communist world. On the fall of the USSR, specifically, Parenti pushes back against the hard notion that the free market won narrative. He argues that the Soviet collapse was not proof that socialism is inherently unworkable. It was the result of specific internal and external pressures, including a pro-capitalist faction that crystallized within the Soviet bureaucracy itself, which is actively working towards restoration. And the consequence of that free market victory is what we call a disastrous impact of the free market transition on Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union. Life expectancy collapsed in Russia. Poverty exploded. Oligarchs looted public assets. The social safety nets that had actually kept people alive were dismantled overnight. This is not liberation, it's extraction. So this book from 1977 still matters because the pattern Parenti identified hadn't gone anywhere. If anything, they gotten more visible. Look at the last decade across Europe and Americas as inequality has deepened and the working class movements have started gaining traction again. We've seen a resurgence of explicitly fascist political movements funded by billionaires, backed by corporate media, and aimed at directly crushing the left. In Brazil, in Hungary, in the United States, a billionaire-backed political movement with openly authoritarian characteristics that directs its entire energy towards dismantling the labor protections and gutting social programs and scapegoating immigrants while the donor class gets tax cuts. This is not a coincidence. This is a pattern. When capital feels threatened, it reaches for the authoritarian toolkit. The specific anesthetics change. It's not the 1930s anymore, but the class logic is still the same. And both sides are the same argument. Both sides are the same argument. The modern version of the totalitarian framing still does exactly the same work it always did. Equating a democratic socialist with a fascist, calling Antifa the same as the Proud Boys, saying the real extremism on both sides. All of this functions to protect the status quo by making any genuine challenge to seem equally dangerous as the forces defending it. So the takeaway is, Parenti forces us to ask the question that mainstream political discourse does everything it can to prevent you from asking. Whose interests does it serve? Not, is this ideology good or bad in the abstract, but who benefits when fascism rises? Who benefits when communism is equated with fascism? Who benefits when the left is discredited? Who benefits when the workers can't organize? The answers are consistent. They have names and addresses, which I can show you. Now, Parenti was a committed Marxist. He died, I think, 2 weeks ago, and God rest his soul. But you should read him critically. Some of his defenses of Soviet-era governments are stronger than others. The lack of citations in some of his factual claims is a real methodological issue that serious readers should flag. And his framework, while powerful, can sometimes flatten in the complex side of things in ways that are worth pushing back on. But that's obviously the core of reading a book. You're not supposed to agree with everything he says. Obviously, I don't agree with everything he said in there. Obviously, I have all these books over here. I don't agree with with all they say. I'm going to show you. All those books right here. Don't mind the spinning skinny pop popcorn. But the core argument of Blackshirts and Reds is that fascism is not an aberration from capitalism, but a tool of it. And the totalitarianism framework was built to serve the Cold War ideology more than analytical clarity. This argument still holds up, and it's more relevant right now than it has been in decades. So I implore you to read the book, and I implore you to think critically about what's going on in this current state of the world, and stay critical, keep thinking, and thank you guys for everything. Peace.